Therapy before crisis, the revolutionary power of preventative mental wellness. What if I told you we've been thinking about mental health all wrong? That we're waiting until the house is on fire before we install smoke detectors? That we're treating our minds like disposable commodities instead of our most precious resource? I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Sandi Johnson-Boyds, a revolutionary mental health advocate whose work has transformed how entire communities approach emotional wellness. Sandi isn't just challenging outdated beliefs, she's dismantling them brick by brick and rebuilding something beautiful in their place. Her pioneering approach has created ripples of healing that have touched thousands of lives, particularly for Black women who have historically carried unbearable burdens without adequate support systems. The truth Sandy revealed is both simple and revolutionary. The belief that therapy is only for moments of crisis isn't just outdated, it's actively harmful. Let that sink in for a moment. We've created a culture where seeking help for our mental health is seen as a last resort, something you do when you're already drowning, not when you first notice the water rising. But what if we flip that narrative entirely? What if therapy wasn't just emergency care, but preventative maintenance? As Sandy eloquently puts it, we schedule dental cleanings before our teeth fall out. We get physical checkups before we collapse. Yet somehow we wait until we're emotionally shattered before we tend to our mental health. This isn't just inefficient, it's dangerous, and it's costing us more than we realize. During our conversation, Sandy shared three fundamental truths that challenge everything we think we know about mental wellness. First, mental health is health, full stop. There's no meaningful separation between our emotional wellness and our physical well being. The science is crystal clear on this. Chronic stress and unprocessed trauma directly impact everything from sleep quality to immune function to cardiovascular health. When we compartmentalize mental health as something separate from real health, we perpetuate a dangerous fiction. Your body keeps the score, Sandy reminded me, referencing the groundbreaking work on trauma. The mind body connection isn't some new age concept, it's biological reality. The second truth: self awareness isn't just nice to have, it's a superpower. Therapy isn't about fixing what's broken, it's about building the foundation of emotional intelligence that empowers us to communicate clearly, set boundaries effectively, and navigate conflict compassionately. Think about it. How many workplace conflicts, family estrangements, or community divisions stem from people lacking the self awareness to understand their own triggers and patterns? How many relationships implode because we never learn to articulate our needs or process our emotions in healthy ways? The third truth Sandy shared cuts straight to the practical. Proactive care saves more than just emotions, it saves relationships, careers, and yes, even money. Waiting until crisis strikes costs exponentially more in every dimension of life. But these aren't just abstract concepts. Sandy shared powerful stories that demonstrate exactly how preventative mental wellness transforms lives and communities. Consider what happened at an urban community center that launched a monthly mental wellness check in program specifically designed for Black women leaders juggling multiple caregiving roles. Initially, many participants viewed therapy as unnecessary unless facing acute distress. The cultural stigma around seeking help was powerful. These were women who had been told their entire lives to be strong, to push through, to handle everything without complaint. The breakthrough came when the center reframed these counseling sessions not as crisis intervention, but as leadership development. By focusing on growth rather than fixing problems, they transformed the entire conversation. The results: were remarkable. Attendance doubled within 6 months. Participants reported dramatically improved communication skills both at work and home. Burnout symptoms plummeted. Several attendees became peer advocates for mental wellness in their churches and sororities, creating a ripple effect throughout the community. What began as a small program sparked by rising reports of exhaustion among Black women during the pandemic has now inspired similar initiatives citywide. Local organizations that once offered only crisis intervention now provide regular preventative workshops. This is what happens when we shift from reactive to proactive mental health care. Or consider the transformation at a historically Black college that launched peer led support groups facilitated by trained Black counselors. The challenge they faced was immense. Over 60% of students believed mental illness was a personal failing, and many feared being perceived as weak if they sought help. The solution? They brilliantly reframed group sessions around success strategies rather than pathology. Instead of talking about mental illness, they focused on practical skills like stress management during finals. This subtle but powerful shift in language opened doors that had previously been firmly shut. Semester after semester, participation increased. Students reported feeling less isolated and more equipped to manage both academic and personal pressures. The student government eventually adopted policies requiring annual wellness workshops for all incoming freshmen. Other HBCUs have since replicated the model after seeing lower dropout rates linked to improved student well being. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about academic success, career readiness, and community resilience. Perhaps most striking was Sandy's story involving a coalition of predominantly Black churches that partnered with licensed therapists. In these sacred space, deep-seated stigma had led congregants to pray away their struggles while hiding pain behind public smiles. The breakthrough came when pastors courageously shared their own stories about using both prayer and professional counseling, what one pastor called Jesus and journaling. By normalizing this dual approach from the pulpit, church leaders transformed their communities. Congregation members began attending both spiritual services and preventive therapy check ins without fear or shame. Family communication improved measurably according to post session surveys. Several members even trained as lay counselors themselves, expanding capacity beyond the initial pilot phase. Local media eventually spotlighted this approach, leading other faith institutions regionally and nationally to adopt similar models. This integration of culturally relevant supports overcame barriers specific to communities most affected by stigma. As Sandy powerfully articulated, healing happens in community when we create spaces where vulnerability is seen not as weakness, but as courage. So, what would happen if more people and especially more organizations embrace therapy proactively rather than reactively? The ripple effects would be profound. Emotional burnout would decrease across families and workplaces. Communities would see fewer crises requiring drastic interventions. Relationships would grow healthier through early boundary setting and conflict resolution skills. Stigma would erode faster when respected leaders openly advocate for routine mental health care. Ultimately, we'd see generational shifts toward wholeness instead of survival mode living. But this isn't just about systems change, it's about personal revolution. As Sandy reminded me, the most radical act of self love is preventative care for your mind. For Black women, especially, who have historically been expected to be the backbone of families and communities while receiving the least support, this shift from crisis only to preventative mental wellness isn't just helpful, it's revolutionary. It's an act of resistance against systems that have expected superhuman strength without acknowledging very human needs. We cannot pour from empty cups, Sandi emphasized. And we cannot build legacies of wellness if we ourselves are running on fumes. I want to challenge you today to rethink everything you thought you knew about mental health care. I want you to consider what might be possible if you stopped waiting for crisis to seek support. What if today, right now, you made a commitment to your mental wellness that was proactive rather than reactive? Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path leads to the familiar pattern, pushing through, ignoring warning signs, waiting until you're completely depleted before seeking help. The other path represents a revolutionary choice, investing in your mental wellness before you need it, building emotional resilience as intentionally as you might build physical strength. Which path will you choose? This isn't a hypothetical question. It's a decision with real consequences for your life, your relationships, your future. So here's my challenge to you: book yourself a wellness check in this month. Not because you're broken, but because you're building, whether it's scheduling your first session with a therapist, joining a supportive group conversation, or simply creating space for regular reflection. Take one step toward making your mind's maintenance part of your regular routine. The world doesn't need more people who are barely surviving. The world needs people who are thriving, who have the emotional capacity to solve problems, build bridges, and create change. And that begins with a revolutionary approach to mental wellness, one that doesn't wait for crisis, but proactively cultivates resilience. As Maya Angelou wisely said, when you know better, you do better. Now we know better about mental health. The question is, will you do better? The answer to that question could change everything, not just for you, but for generations to come.